Okay, so welcome to the beginner's guide for Europa Universalis IV. I'm excited to share this with you, so let's get started. On the bottom, let's select single player here. And immediately we are greeted with a map of Europe. And with a name called Europa Universalis, you would assume that the game is solely regulated to Europe in general. But as I zoom out, I can see the entire world as it stood in the late 15th century kind of come into view here. You can certainly play as an independent nation in North America, South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, Asia, etc. But for your first game, I would recommend sticking closer to a country in the European continent because a lot of the European countries start with a leg up in technological advancement. On the left-hand side of the screen, we can see a variety of start dates, and I can click any one of them and you can see the map changing, and we can certainly play at that year, but let's just select the baseline normal 1444 start date. We will be playing this beginner's guide as England, but you can certainly click or play as any country you would like. On the bottom, there are a bunch of country shields with their coat of arms, and as I highlight over like France, for example, you see how it glows with a sort of light orange reddish hue. All I would do is just click on France or directly onto the map, click play, and we are off. So on the right-hand side of the screen, we see a bunch of symbols and numbers that we don't quite know what to do with. But I do want to point your attention to a couple things. So obviously, as England, we see our country shield, the name of our country, and below that is the name of our current monarch, Henry VI. Below him are his actual attributes, and the attributes of your ruler are extremely important for making decisions in the game, technological advancement, because they build up every single month, and once you have a certain amount, you can unlock new technologies, you can upgrade your provinces, etc. So the stats of your ruler become very important. King Henry VI is obviously a horrible ruler. He was the son of King Henry V of Agincourt fame, and King Henry V died at a relatively young age, leaving his incompetent son on the throne. So compare these numbers here with these numbers when I click on France and King Charles VII. So what these numbers mean are your leader has attribute points in administrative skill, diplomatic skill, and military skill. Every country at the start of the game starts with 3 skill points as just a general baseline in each one of these categories, and it's your monarch or their monarch points that can add extra points every month to allow more points to be added to the pool every single month. So obviously, England isn't going to start with any bonuses every month, but France here will, and as they develop more and more technology, more and more points, they're going to be able to unlock more technology quicker, thus making them think that they're going to have a leg up on us, but we aren't going to let Charles get away with that. So below your ruler's attribute points in administrative, diplomatic, and military skill, we see the relative technology level of your country. So right now, and we don't quite know what this means yet, but we start with 3 points or technology level 3 in administrative, technology level 3 in diplomatic, and level 3 in military skill. So let's click England, select play, and if you're not familiar with Paradox games, usually there are 2 modes that you can select from, either normal mode or Iron Man mode. Iron Man mode just limits the amount of saves that you're allowed, but it does allow you to get achievements, but we aren't going to achievement hunt today, so let's just select normal mode and click play. I am playing this game unmodded, so don't be surprised if you notice that your game looks much different than mine, and I also have all the DLCs unlocked as well. So at first we're greeted with a wall of text, and feel free to read this at your own leisure, as this basically just gives a political background to your country and where it finds itself on the world stage, the current religion that we belong to. We are currently Catholic, and the bonuses that Catholicism gives us, what our current government type is. Obviously, we are a monarchy, and the environment of our portion of the world that we find ourselves in. So let's click close here. And let me just orient you to what we're seeing right now. So right now, my map mode that is selected down here is the political map mode. You can change any map mode that you would like by, if this is a blank area or if you already have a map mode here, all you have to do is right click, add a new, or add another map mode, click here, and then scroll to find which map mode you would like. But we aren't going to get too much into the weeds about this. Let me just kind of introduce you to the landscape. On the top right here, we can pause or start time. Here's our time right here. We can increase the speed of the game. We see our country rank as well. We have a little outliner here that has a lot of important information that, again, we don't quite know what to do with yet. And if you don't see this outliner, you can just click this little button beneath the pause button and open it right here. Beneath that, you'll get like several pop-up messages down here about what other countries are up to. You don't really have to pay attention to this too much at first. And obviously below this is your different selection of map modes. At the top here, we have a variety of different currencies. Obviously, this is, your economic currency. You have manpower currencies, your stability, corruption, prestige, legitimacy, power projection, all the different characters that you can hire. So let's just pause for a second, because when I first made this tutorial, I went into a ton of detail about what each and everything of the UI meant, but I realized that after watching it, it just was kind of overwhelming. So what we're going to do instead is we're just going to unpack the map and the UI and let the game just kind of evolve organically. At the top left here, you have your country shield, and we have a bunch of different tabs. We have our economy tab, trade tab, ideas tab. Don't get too overwhelmed yet. Trust me, I'll come back to this, and this will all make sense soon. Let's just close out of this. Beneath your country shield, you have what's called a production interface, and this is a very easy way to either quickly build troops or improve your provincial development, and we're going to touch on this shortly. But the start of this guide, I'm going to organize it into two kind of main parts. The first part is going to be organized around monarch points and why they are so important. And you can see them right here, again, like we mentioned before: administrative power, diplomatic power, and military power, what they're used for, and how we get more of them. The second part of the guide is going to revolve around finances, taxation, production, and finally trade. Note though that trade is a pretty complex subject, but I'm going to try to explain it in kind of a logical and organic way, so you kind of know what you're doing and what you want to do with your country when you first start playing. Additionally, at the top here, we have a lot of kind of pop-ups, and just ignore these for now as I introduce you to the game, but you'll get sporadic pop-ups here that just kind of orient you to what certain decisions in your game you need to make or resolve. So when I look at the map, obviously in the political map mode, I see all of the countries here organized based on colors and names, just kind of telling me like what these individual provinces are and things like that. But when I zoom out, I can actually see a zoomed out view of the name of all the countries kind of involved in the world. So obviously we're playing as England. The country that you play as will be subdivided into several different regions. Those regions are states and provinces. States are outlined by this kind of dark outline color here, and within the state you have these smaller, lightly outlined regions called provinces. So let's click on Oxford, for example. And Oxford, we have a bunch of information about this province in general. Again, that we don't quite know what to do with it. This is just me proving to you that these buttons exist. But this is how we get a readout of everything that's kind of going on in our individual province. And you see how it's kind of highlighted on the screen as well. When I click on the button next to it, I see the readout of the state of London. And the state of London incorporates Oxford, London, Sussex, and Kent right here. So let's now circle back and discuss Monarch points. After we discuss Monarch points and technology, I'll then move on to the second part of the video, which will involve finances, taxes, and trade. Now, let's discuss Monarch points, which are absolutely key to your country's advancement and ability to unlock new technologies, troop and ship types, and new buildings. Underneath this big bar, we see the same symbols we were introduced to at the start of the video. These are administrative power, diplomatic power, and military power. If I hover over administrative power, I see that I'm getting +2 Monarch points every month. My baseline value is 3 every month. I am not getting any additional points per month because my Monarch is horrible. And 1 point is being subtracted from something called national focus for a total of 2 points every month. So next month, my Monarch points in administrative will go from 28 to 30. So, okay, Rex, if this is so important, how do we improve the numbers? Let's click on the shield on the top left, which gives us several tabs we can use to view our country information. When we click on it, we are greeted with the Court tab. Under this, we can see our current ruler giving us 0 points across the board. And not to spoil anything in the future, but King Henry VI will soon be deposed and we will have a new monarch, so this shouldn't be a problem for long. Or he won't. Each game you play is different, which makes the game so fun. Below your ruler will be his male or female heir once they make one, which we will talk more about in the second video. Now, beneath the ruler, we have several slots that correlate with administrative, diplomatic, and military sections, and we see the amount of points we are getting every month. Next to this, we see a blank picture portrait that we can click on and select and choose an advisor and change our national focus. This way, we can earn more points every month. So, for example, let's choose an administrative advisor. We click on the portrait, and at the start of the game, we have 3 different advisors you can choose from. You can see their name, and below their name are bonuses that they grant. To the right of their name, we can see how many extra points they are granting to us per month. Note though, each advisor has a hiring cost and a monthly upkeep cost. If we look at the top left of the screen, we see how much money or ducats we currently have. We can click on the economy tab and see that our balance every month is plus 179, so we want our monthly cost to be below that. Let's select John Cargrave, who cost 5.9 ducats and will cost 0.50 monthly. We can now see that our total ducats decreased to 65, and we are now making plus 1.29 per month. And you can also see the advisor cost under the expenses column here. Now, I can also see I'm getting 3 administrative monarch points per month either on this tab or if I hover over the administrative section above. But it still says -1 national focus, and let me show you how to change that. So see here how we have a green check mark next to diplomatic power. When one of these is selected, it simply adds 2 power monthly to that Monarch power category, while subtracting 1 point from the other 2 Monarch power categories. We can either not have a national focus by declicking it, or reassign it to another category. Let's do that right now to administrative power, and we can see how we're getting +2 administrative power and +1 from our advisor, and now our monthly administrative power has increased to +6. Play around with this as you wish, or reallocate points as you continue to play, but note that you can only change your national focus every 20 years. So, okay, Rex, we get it. Your ruler is important, and we can improve it by advisors and stuff, but who cares, and what are these points used for? On the top of the screen, you will get a notification once you have enough of these points stockpiled to unlock new technologies. The game usually has these pop-ups here to help prompt you to events or things you need to address. Now, if we open back up our country tab and click on the tab labeled technology, we see again these 3 columns labeled administrative, diplomatic, and military. So start to see a pattern here. Underneath the administrative technology section, I see a small bar with a little bit of green in it. When I hover over that bar, I see that I have 28 power available, and I need a total of 598 points to unlock the new level of technology. Each level of respective technologies that you unlock grant further and further bonuses to your country, and I'm tempted to go into all the bonuses that you start unlocking, but for now, just know that more technology unlocked grants more income, trade possibilities, the ability to colonize, etc. To further illustrate how important this is, the quicker I unlock military or diplomatic technology, the quicker I can retrofit and upgrade my armies and ships with newer weapons, ship types, generals, and fighting techniques. For example, if I was at Military Technology 6 with 4,000 men and fought an army of 8,000 men whose country only had level 3, I would absolutely decimate the other army despite being significantly outnumbered. Once you reach a particular level of technology, you can also use your points to unlock idea groups. These are added bonuses you can select if you have Monarch points left over, but they do give pretty important bonuses, and it comes down to weighing the pros and the cons of whether you'd rather invest your points unlocking technologies or unlocking new idea groups. Now, I say left over because you can stockpile up to 999 power in each category, but sometimes it may not be advantageous to waste your points in unlocking a technology too soon. On the technology screen, we see a little timer thing here that compares your technology level to your neighbors. So for example, if I start steamrolling ahead and start unlocking technologies way ahead of my neighbors, each subsequent unlock will become more and more expensive until they catch up relative to you. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't do that, but just in case you wonder in the future why your technology costs are becoming way too expensive, that is probably why. It is also used to your advantage if you fall behind in a particular technology group relative to your neighbors, as then unlocking new technologies will become cheaper and easier for you to unlock. That is a very brief overview of Monarch points, but note that they are used for other decisions, changing cultures of conquered territories, and a variety of things. But let's now move on to the finances portion. So let's talk about finances. At the start of the game, taxation and production of goods make up the majority of your income. But as the game progresses, trade, when I click on this trade map mode right here, makes up a significant and important part of your overall income, and is really how you start to start steamrolling and generating more and more income. But let's just talk about taxation and production to start. So when I look at my country, I see that the country is subdivided into a bunch of different regions. These regions are allocated by these really dark black lines. And within these dark black lines is a state. Now, within the state, you have different provinces, kind of highlighted by these smaller, darker lines. So, for example, when I click on Oxford here, it highlights, and we get a bunch of information on the left-hand side of the screen. If this side button doesn't pop up, just click this small little tab. Trust me, I had to play for hours before I even knew this thing was here. When I go on the top, I see that Oxford is highlighted. Same with Sussex here. But to look at the actual state, all I have to do is click on London, and the entire area with all the provinces within it becomes highlighted. I can see here that the state of London contains Kent, London, Oxford, and Sussex. So to illustrate taxation and production, let's just use Oxford as an example. So right here, I can see the amount of taxation that Oxford brings in. The same thing, when I click on Sussex, I can see the amount of taxation that Sussex brings in. But the total amount that the individual province makes is a combination of both your taxation and production to give you a total. And then when I click on my country shield and go to economy, I can see the amount of income I'm making every month. And let me just add on the other advisor that we had picked in the previous scene. So, okay. So we see the current balance that we're making every month. We have the taxation here, of our entire country, the amount of production, and the amount of trade we're compiling. Your income, obviously, minus your expenses, gives you your total balance. Let's go back to Oxford and, okay, so how do we improve our taxation? How do we improve our production? And how do we just generally get more income? So when I hover over taxation, it says that I'm getting a baseline of 0.33 monthly, or a total yearly income of 4, or 4 divided by 12. Subtracted from that are some negative modifiers that you can change later, but in general, in order to improve the taxation of your individual provinces, you do need to spend Monarch points in the administrative power category in this box right here in order to increase your monthly taxation. I did use a console command to increase our Monarch points temporarily, just so I can show you this in action. So for example, there's this little button here saying spend 51 administrative power to improve your base tax, and will improve our monthly tax income by 0.07. So right now it's 0.27. We click this right here, and boom, we just increased our taxation by 0.34. But remember, this uses Monarch points, and Monarch points are a very valuable resource, like we discussed with technology. So you may want to use this sparingly, but this is how we do it. The amount of taxation you get is also improved by something called tax income efficiency, or tax efficiency. The way that we improve our tax efficiency is by building buildings. You see, when we click on the Buildings tab, once we reach a high enough technology, we can unlock a church, which gives a local tax modifier of plus 40%. We can unlock even a cathedral, which increases the taxation as well. So that's how you kind of gradually improve taxation of your provinces if you want. And this doesn't have to be done individually. You don't have to go into every single province and just click here every single time to improve it. What you can actually do is there's a small button underneath a shield called the production interface. When I click that, this is kind of a very easy way on a global scale to either produce troops, core provinces, which we haven't really got into, decrease local autonomy, but also I click on this development button and we can go either on the map and increase the amount of taxation we get here, or we can go right here and do this manually as well by clicking these buttons. So that's a very kind of short, easy way, so you don't have to click on each individual province. Now, let's talk about the one thing we've left out, which is something called production. So every province in the game produces a specific good. As we see down here, Oxford is producing livestock, and the current livestock right now is about 2 ducats. That's how much livestock costs on the global stage. Like we discussed map modes before, if I click down here and click trade goods, or if you want to change your current map mode, all you have to do is right click, add another map mode, or just add a brand new map mode, because your screen will probably be blank. Search for trade goods on the drop down, select it. That's the actual trade button. But the trade good things is right here. You select it, and then you'll be able to populate the trade good map mode. And when I click on the trade good map mode, because I have Oxford selected, it shows every province that kind of has cattle, right? But if I exit out of that, kind of like the world comes into view of what each individual province develops. And what I recommend when you first start is to kind of look at these different trade goods and see what their value is. Because obviously, if your province produces more expensive, better trade goods, the more income that province is going to make in production. So for example, while Oxford has this livestock that the current price is about 2 ducats, if I go over to Bedfordshire, it's selling cloth here for 3 ducats. So my strategy may want to be to increase production of Bedfordshire instead of just focusing on low production goods such as Oxford. So as you can see, so Bedfordshire is currently at a level 3 base production, but its income production is about 0.16 every month. Oxford, even though it's one whole level higher, is only producing 0.13 value. Now, there's a little bit of math that goes into this, but again, when you first start, you can increase the production of your province. This time, instead of clicking on administrative power, you can click on and use diplomatic power here to improve the base production, giving you more monthly production income. So let's click that and see how the production changes. See how it went up just a little bit? This number is actually the amount of trade goods that you produce, because you see here, when I increased it, when I spent diplomatic power to increase my base production, watch how these numbers down here change. So currently I'm producing 1 good whose trade value is 2, and this is over a year. So 2 divided by 12 is about 0.16 per month. So I can produce more of this livestock by clicking here again. Now watch how these numbers change. So the trade value increased a little bit, and the amount that's produced is increased a little bit as well, thus increasing the amount we produce here. So 0.34-ish plus 0.2 increases our total income by 0.55. So you can see how this starts steamrolling. Like if you have a very valuable province that you continue to upgrade that has a very valuable trade good, one, for example, can be cloth or certainly not wool, salt, copper, for example. These are pretty valuable trade goods. And again, I would look at your production interface here, and you can actually see if you want to increase your production here, you can look at the production interface and see what you actually want to increase and improve. This becomes very paramount. For example, if you're settling in India or the New World in North America, especially South America, where you start having access to specific items such as gold, jewels, tobacco, spices, those can be extremely valuable on the world stage. So that's just to say that if you want to increase your taxation and production here, you can develop provinces, and you can develop provinces through here using administrative or diplomatic power in order to either increase your taxation or increase your production. Production efficiency is kind of the same as taxation efficiency. For example, like if we built a workshop in Oxford, we'd increase our local production efficiency by 50%, thus increasing the amount of goods that we produce and the amount of income we make. The important distinction between taxation and production and trade that we'll go into is that taxation and production is intrinsic to your country, so it's not really altered by competition from your neighbors. When we get into actual trade, this is something that you're going to need to compete with here. Now let's go into that now. So now let's talk about trade. Down here is the trade map mode, which we have already selected. And full disclosure, trade is a notoriously complex and esoteric subject, and there are plenty of hour-long guides discussing this, but let's try to look at it intuitively. Let's first click on the political map mode and then click to the trade map mode. The first difference we see is that the world is organized into trade node regions, which are labeled on the map. These regions do not change. Trade flows in a one-way direction, moving from one node to the next, and ultimately ending in what's called an end trade node. For example, trade is arriving from the west, from the soon-to-be-discovered New World, and going into the Bordeaux trade node. It then flows from Bordeaux and into Champagne, and then it flows out of the Champagne trade node, going south to Genoa, and then north to the English Channel. The larger blue boxes here are the actual trade nodes. The smaller blue boxes represent how much trade is flowing out downstream and leaving the original trade node. The flow of trade is represented by these arrows here, and again, trade flow only moves in one direction and cannot be changed. There are 3 trade nodes in the game, though, that trade doesn't flow out of. These are Genoa, Venice, and the English Channel. making these trade nodes very powerful. See how, for example, there are no arrows flowing out of the English Channel trade region. Every country will have a capital trade node region, which automatically collects trade income based on the percentage you control. That is symbolized by this golden symbol. So your ultimate goal is to control as much of your trade node as possible, represented by what's called trade power, and increase the trade value of goods going into your node, represented by what's called trade value. Let's discuss how to do that. If I look at the English Channel, I see two different numbers. The top number represents what's called our trade power. We see that we have 192 trade power, which means we control 51% of this trade node. The numbers below that represent the total value of the trade produced by the English Channel region or sent to the English Channel region. The total value of trade in this node is 13.4 ducats. And because we control 51% of this node, we see in parentheses we are making 8 ducats per month. Now let's click on the trade node and look at this breakdown further. On this screen, we see the incoming and local trade values created. We also see the amount of trade power we have compared to other countries in this node. On the bottom of the screen, we see a readout of the countries involved in this trade node. Their trade value that they get is marked on this side, on the left side, and is broken down into how much they receive with any modifiers. And the trade power is marked on the right side, calculated by the amount of light ships patrolling, how much power the provinces you control exert, bonus modifiers, and then the total trade power we are awarded. Let's first talk about the amount of trade power, and then we can discuss how to get more trade value. Currently, we have 51% trade power. Let's look at why that is. Again, on the bottom ledger, we see our country, England. All of the countries who are passively or actively trying to compete for trade power in the region are listed here. All of the trade power is summed up amongst these countries, put into a pool, and the percent you get is based on the amount of power you have in that node compared to the others. So we see currently we have 192.3 trade power in total, which means we have 51% of all the trade power of countries combined, meaning we collect 51% of the income in this node. So how do we get trade power and that 192 number, and how can we increase it? Well, there are a few ways, but let me touch on the main contributors as shown by these columns and go step by step. The first column represents how many light ships we have patrolling the region. Note that only the light ship type can patrol and contribute to trade power. Each light ship we send to patrol this node grants us 2 trade power per light ship. Now, I know I haven't discussed land or naval warfare yet, but let's briefly touch on this. When I look back at the English trade node, I see there is a symbol for ships and a 0 next to it, meaning we have no ships patrolling the region, as also shown here. And obviously, we need to protect our trade from those dirty pirates. How we do this is we can click on our navy in the outliner on the right or directly on the map. Doing so gives us information on our navy. Let's select our blue squadron navy and we see a readout of the ships in this navy. There are 4 main ship types in the game. Heavy ships, which are your powerful fighting force, light ships that are fast and used for patrolling and trade production, but not as effective in a fight, galleys, which are good for fighting in shallow seas, and transport ships, which transport your troops over water. We can see on this screen we have 9 light ships in this navy. Let's go down to assign a mission, click on protect trade, and then select English Channel Trade node. Now, automatically, these ships will go out and protect trade of the English Channel. Each light ship assigned to patrol a trade node will give 2 trade power to that node. So, since we have 9 ships assigned, once we unpause the game, we will get 18 extra power to this region. So that's how light ships are used. The next column over, we see provincial trade power. Now, every province that we own within the trade region contributes trade power to that region. We have actually already seen this in the prior lesson on taxation and production. So, for example, if I hover over the 177 number, I see a list of provinces we own that belong to this trade node, and we can see here that Oxford is giving us 3 trade power. If I click on Oxford, I can see that trade power right here is 3. Again, we can increase this by spending diplomatic power to increase this number, and we can also build buildings that increase the trade power of each individual province as well. If I go back to the trade node, we can see that one of the main reasons Holland is getting trade power is because they own a country or province in this trade region. But wait, how come they are getting so much trade power from these 3 little provinces? Well, if you look at these little picturesque boxes, these actually represent static important coastal or inland centers of trade. These are static on the map and should also be considered when you start expanding. They can be upgraded, but they can't be added to new provinces manually. For example, if I go up here to look at Lincolnshire, I can hover over the picturesque symbol thing representing a natural harbor. When I click on the province and look in the building tab, I see a bright picture of the port, and when I hover over it, it says that the natural harbor is giving me +5 trade power to this region. So if I have enough ducats, I can upgrade the natural port by and thereby giving me even more trade power. Let's now go back to the English Channel Trade node. We can even get more trade power in this node by this modifier here. It looks like we are getting 25% extra trade power because of merchants we have assigned upstream, our power projection, and prestige. Now, I'll touch on power projection and prestige as seen up here in the next video, but merchants are an important trade concept to understand. Merchants are essentially used to steer trade into your home node because, remember, a lot of nodes split off and empty into other nodes. Merchants are identified by their symbol at the top here. Currently we have 0 out of 2 merchants available because they are both assigned in the ledger here. We can click on the merchants to see where they are assigned, and we can see that where they are assigned based on their green symbol in another trade node. The amount they are steering outbound into our trade node is symbolized by this red check mark here. Merchants are good for nudging and steering trade into your capital region. Once you get more merchants, you can eventually assign them to multiple trade nodes, gradually steering trade across the world into different nodes and eventually dumping into your capital trade node. Again, this is more of an advanced topic, but that is how we can manipulate incoming trade. Also, as a quick aside, this button here says collect from trade. You don't need to send a merchant to your home trade node to do this because it's our capital trade node, it does so automatically. You can recall your merchants and assign them to other trade nodes manually, but let's just leave them where they are for now for this beginner's guide. So assigning light trade ships to patrol, increasing the trade power of your provinces, and assigning merchants upstream from your capital trade node are all ways to increase your trade power and thus increase and collect more trade income. Now let's move on to discuss how to increase the amount of trade income or trade value in your node. On the left side of the trade node screen, we see that the total trade value of the node is 13.4 ducats. That is because the incoming trade value is 3.9 ducats and the total local trade value is 9.5 ducats. Incoming trade is slightly complex and I'd really like to get into the weeds about this, but let's just pen that for a more advanced discussion. A very basic way to look at it is the more power you have and the more trade value you have from your provinces, the more your trade node acts as a magnet and encourages flow from other trade nodes, which can be influenced by getting more provinces in a different trade region, sending light ships, and certainly sending merchants upstream. Local trade income, however, is a little more intuitive to understand. Just like trade power, all of the provinces in a trade region contribute to the local trade value of your node. If I hover over the local trade value, I can see a compiled list of each province and how much they contribute to trade value. Let's look at Oxford again as an example. We see that Oxford here is making 2.4 trade value yearly or 0.2 trade value monthly. Let's click on Oxford and we can see it right here. As we discussed before, this value is based on the value of goods the province produces and can be upgraded via buildings or improving the province in general. So, in general, to increase your trade value, increase the development of your wealthy provinces, build buildings, and send merchants upstream to steer trade from other regions into your node. Okay. So that was a really short rundown in trade. I promise by the next video we will actually unpause the game, but that was the basic rundown on how to research and improve technologies, improve finances, whether by taxation, production, and finally trade. Now that we understand why these mechanics are so important and what we need to do to expand our empire, in the next video, let's actually get into diplomacy and warfare. Soon, we will be able to improve and create an empire, leading to the eventual downfall of our enemies. This is Rex. Thank you again, and see you in the next one.